We're going to do the entire podcast in fake accents so that no one knows we're talking about sex. It's not me, Mum. I'm not talking about sex. No, someone else. I don't know.
Right, so I've just got to tell you that I've shaved, I've washed my hair, I smell good. Vicky says I smell good, so I'm ready. Let's go.
Oh, do you now? Oh, you dressed up for us, did you? Oh.
Good to know. Good to know you made the effort.
Nice. Do you not normally? That's so rude.
Right, so there's the funny part for the beginning of the podcast. I've been planning that all day.
Oh, have you? You're thinking about that at random points in the day. How can I be funny?
Yeah. What's the intro?
Oh.
Welcome to the Full Stop Podcast with your hosts, Sarah Lawrence, Berenice Smith and Michael Hughes. And if this is your first time here, our podcast is centred around supporting the childless not by choice community. And our aim is to be a focal point for the community and with all our special guests, show you how to manage your grief and give a voice to the issues specific to us. And by example, show that a full and a happy life can be had without those children we dearly wanted. This episode was put together for World Childless Week, Childless and Intimacy Day. And if you have stumbled upon this episode and unaware of World Childless Week, then pop over to www.worldchildlessweek.net to find out all about it. And if you are here because of World Childless Week, then happy World Childless Week to you. The three of us were quite nervous about this episode. It may be our longest one yet. And I think we were all very courageous, and to do it justice, we kept the editing down to a minimum, but enough from me. Let's get this rolling.
Congratulations, Sarah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, congratulations, Sarah. It's really such... I feel so good for you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
People...
Yeah. God, you better say what it is you won, because people won't know. I don't know.
Yes, no, I've been very lucky. I've won the first ever People's Champion for World Childless Week. So the lovely Steph that runs it all texted me, and I had to reread it like 5 times. I said to my husband, "Can you just read this for me? I don't think I'm reading it right." And he went, "No, it's real." Oh my God. So yeah, it's amazing. I was just like, oh my God, I had all these feelings. You know, I felt overwhelmed. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't like the spotlight, but oh my goodness. Yeah. So I had 3 beers to celebrate yesterday. I was like, oh my goodness. So yeah, I just feel very, very loved and very warm and cuddly, which is most unlike me because, you know, don't really do cuddly. But yeah.
You're going to lose your feisty edge, darling.
No. But yeah, so I suppose opportunity to say thank you to everyone that nominated me. I don't know who nominated me. I don't know what was said, but thank you. Really, really appreciate it.
No, well deserved. Well deserved.
So well deserved. Just many huge congratulations, feisty one that you are.
Yeah. Feisty's gone back on because I don't do tears.
I can tell. We can tell. There's kind of like a visible difference. We've got feisty Sarah and nicely smelling Michael. And I'm just here, listeners, dear friends. I just turned up the usual way, as I always do. So sorry if that's mildly disappointing, but there we are.
Yes. So we're talking about sex, though.
I'm nervous.
Everyone goes quiet. I'm going to say my bit now. I'm going to say the thing that I think is important about this, which is that everybody else, particularly in the Daily Mail comment section, seems to have an opinion about sex and childlessness. Don't they? You know, I think you always get it. And yeah, actually, we don't talk about it. We don't podcast. You know, God, what's this episode, whatever we're on, 30 something or another, you know, and we kind of allude to it, you know, it obviously pops up in conversations. We might have a laugh about it. We might just go, oh yeah, walk away from it. And we're nervous about this episode as well. But actually, we don't talk about it enough. But everyone seems to have an opinion on it, from whether you're doing it wrong, didn't start early, or you know, offer to help. Charming. But yeah, everyone else seems to have an opinion about it except us, and I think that is just so bloody rude and insulting.
So telling. as well, isn't it? It's like a taboo within a taboo within a taboo, isn't it? It's kind of, we've all said that we're a bit sort of like, oh gosh, a bit uncomfortable with this, but actually, you know, I think we've had comments and people asking us to cover certain topics, and we've all sat there and read the comments, gone, yeah, we chime with everything that's been said here in terms of how kind of worth and your own image and how you feel about it is tied up with sex in a way. It makes for an uncomfortable discomfort in yourself when you are childless, not by choice, I think.
Yeah, because actually when you think about it, I feel like I'm going to be really insensitive, and my apologies to anyone if I offend anybody listening, but it's ultimately perhaps the reason why we're all here. Actually, it's either medical, physical, or not meeting the person, or meeting someone that you think, oh no, I don't think it's you. It's ultimately the sperm, the egg, the embryo, what happens to the embryo should one get that far. But actually it's the bit of the sperm, the egg, the sex part, however that happens, whether it's within the body, in a laboratory, wherever that might be, in a petri dish, whatever. Petri dish, anyway. That's why ultimately maybe we're all in this room, in this space. Is it? I don't know. I mean, there's lots of other complications there are, but ultimately that is the bit, which is sex. Ultimately, a biological act that may or may not happen in some form.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think through, because I know when it wasn't the last time I saw Jodie, but one of the first times I met her at the Fertility Fest, and we were talking about the list, the 50 ways not to be a mother, with apologies to Paul Simon, which is great. Go and find it if you haven't read it before, then to go and look at it. But I remember her saying, this was at Shepherd's Bush all those years ago, and when I first met you, Michael, and she said it's not 50 anymore. I think at the time she said it was 80, probably 100, I think she said, since. All these reasons and complications why, but I think if you went through and distilled them all down, it goes back to the thing that actually maybe we don't talk about enough. I know that we're talking about it a lot more because this episode is going out on World Childless Week's Childless and Sexual Intimacy Day, but actually that's the first as well. 5 years of World Childless Week, and it's the first time we've recorded an episode. I know Jodie's doing a webinar as well when this goes out on that day, and it'll be back for if you're listening to this later, you can go back and look on World Childless Week's website, and it'll be recorded and posted up there, so you can go and find it. But again, we're starting to have these conversations.
Yeah, but you can hear our discomfort, can't you?
We're not our usual selves, are we?
We are not our usual selves.
We're not our usual selves. And I just wanted to say to listeners as well, we don't have a guest here. We made a decision because there's so many people doing some brilliant stuff out there, and we actually have had people contact us to say they'd like to be a guest on this, but we actually took a decision last month when we did our last sort of admin thing. We do admin chats, which are much easier actually than this one, and we made the decision that for our own comfort and our own kind of just riffing this out, seeing how it went, we just do it between the three of us, because we thought actually we'd be a little bit more comfortable with it as well. But yeah, we're all a little bit uncertain. I know you are as well, Michael.
Yeah, I was, when we first started talking about it, I'll be really honest and think, oh, fuck, what is this going to be like? And I think I've been a bit nervous all day, actually, because it's now, 7:30 in the evening here in Australia, Saturday night, and I've been doing a lot of stuff in the workshop, and that's been going through my mind all day. You know, talking to Vicky yesterday about it, saying that we're going to be doing an episode on this, and are you okay if I do, if certain things that you okay with if I mention this? So getting her, okay. And yeah, there's so many things that go through my head, and I can't distill it down to one right now, because the conversation that we had was around how infertility affects intimacy. If all right, I'm going to go out on a limb here. So there was nothing better than a Saturday afternoon, at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We were younger, and you'd look at each other and go, no words, just go, yeah, all right then. And it'd be time for a Saturday afternoon matinee. And there was nothing better than that. Spontaneous, it was just the two of us, and awesome. And then you go through, and I know I'm speaking to the converted, but then you go through all the treatments and everything else, and the magic just gets taken away. And I know, speaking to Vicky and some of the comments that we've got about doing this show and the chat we had last night, where it has, it really affected Vicky in a way that she began to hate herself, because, she just, getting pregnant was just such a thing for her, and she just couldn't learn to love herself, and just hated herself. And that so sad, such a sad thing, because I, as a guy, I never ever thought that way. Never. I never thought that, just because we're not going to be parents, that you're no less of a woman, you're no less desirable. It was never, ever entered my mind. And it really upsets me greatly, as I immerse myself into our community, that sits there. Mm. Because I think I can speak for most guys, and they would say the same as what I've just said.
I think it's difficult. I guess guys have got their viewpoint of it, especially perhaps if a guy has the infertility, or perhaps it's both of you. I might be a bit different, but I think I really chime with what Vicky said. I really, really struggled. So it went from being something that was fun and that I really enjoyed to something that became a monotonous, going through the motions. Sometimes you'd even fake it just to think, I just really want the kid. This is the ultimate goal. And that really sort of puts a wedge between you and your partner without them realising it, because you are just going through the motions. Mm. And then you get spat out the other side, and you have various feelings about your body and it not fucking working. And you're like, can I cope without sex? Actually, maybe I can, because it's taken on a different, whole different meaning. It's not fun anymore. It's not going to give me what I want. And I think it takes time to kind of learn to like yourself enough to actually go, actually, I quite enjoy it. I do quite enjoy sex again now, because I'm not striving for something I can't have. But that's not an overnight like that. You don't suddenly go, oh, right, I'm okay with the fact that I'm infertile. I don't think I ever will be. It fucks me off enormously. But to deprive myself of sex, just not something I think I could do. And I hope Jim's all right with me talking about this. Didn't check. But that's kind of the journey, isn't it? It's kind of it goes from something that's lovely, like a bonding, to something that's absolutely awful and quite traumatic.
Yeah. And what you said, Sarah, Vicky said pretty much word for word. She says, there were days when I was just trying to, I just wanted to get pregnant.
Yeah.
It wasn't about us. It wasn't about, the connection, the intimacy between the two of us. It was just about seed. And I want the seed. And that took me a little bit of time to get used to, actually, because, you like to think that it's that moment where the two of you, obviously, show your love to each other, and that intimacy is extremely important for, the continual growth of your relationship. And that really, that really hit me, actually. I'll be honest, and it took me a while to get used to that. And I'm good now, but I think, I talk about it took a decade for us to that path to acceptance, and this was a major part of it. Like after the IVF thing, depression, I think there was quite a considerable amount of time where we just didn't have sex, because it was just like, we just both couldn't face it, and we had to then learn again to be intimate with each other without that, that thing that came between us, so to speak. It took a long time.
Yeah, it really does. It's kind of almost like an unsaid as well, isn't it? Because obviously you talked about the guy's perspective and the woman's perspective. My perspective was very different, in terms of sex became this thing that I just had no interest in for a while, because I didn't like myself. I naffed off with my body. Why would I want to share it with anybody else? So I think, bless him, Jim sort of was very patient with me while I, went and sorted myself out, and it took time to get used to wanting it again. I don't know if people share this, but I found that actually almost the urge to want sex as well becomes upsetting, if you see what I mean. You kind of, you want it, you biologically want it, you want that touch, you want that intimacy, but actually I felt so low. It's like, well, why do I deserve that? So in the end, it was kind of, yes, I wanted it, but it was kind of, actually, I don't want it, if you see what I mean. It's kind of like the body versus the brain. And Vicky, it was really... And
again, Vicky said exactly the same thing. She said, I actually felt I didn't deserve to feel good. And just, wow, that's heavy shit. That's, and so, I'm a bit lost for words right now.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough, I think. I think perhaps the reason we don't talk about sex is because it's another loss, kind of a way, isn't it?
Most definitely.
Never thought about it like that, but yeah, it probably is. It is. I mean, a lot of what you said correlates to the conversation that I've had with my other half. We just sort of, it was odd, slightly different. I don't know if it's different or it's the same, or it relates to somebody, but I sort of went through a period of sort of great sort of, I don't know, I want to sort of use the word of abuse, but in the sense that I just started drinking too much for a while. So we had, I think, at the very beginning of our relationship, I found I was pregnant and I miscarried, and that happened a couple of times. And I thought, oh, well, I've got time. They were upsetting, but time. And then we got slightly towards that bit where, oh, we're going to need help. And I'd had miscarriages before, and it wasn't necessarily confined to this relationship, but before. So I knew there was something wasn't right, but kind of just stuck my head in the sand thinking, oh, well, I've got time. It'll be okay. And then the closer we got to the bit where I ended up going to different doctors and things and being poked and prodded around. And I think it sort of dawned on me at some point, oh, God, it's going to be IVF. And I went off the rails. I literally went, I ate all the wrong food, I drank too much, I went out and partied quite a bit without my husband. Never unfaithful, but, you know, I certainly was aware I probably wasn't perhaps keeping maybe the best company in the world. And gained weight, lost weight, gained weight, lost weight, lost lots of weight, gained lots of weight, lost weight, bounced around, you know, all the things that actually you shouldn't do if you want to be healthy and conceive naturally. So I was kind of punishing myself in kind of ways I shouldn't have punished myself in, because actually I thought that if I actually put my husband off enough, we won't have sex, therefore I won't go through the bit where actually I miscarry, because then I won't conceive and that'll be fine, it'll be okay, you know, I can deal with that. I'd just be just that repulsive and that awful that actually, you know, and sort of testimony to my husband that actually, well, the time of recording this, although it'll be past then, is that in the 7th of September, we're actually together for 25 years. But that's a bit of a miracle because of, I think, you know, been through probably more than we've all been through, our listeners have been through more than perhaps we all should do individually. And that was kind of my attitude to things. And he sort of hung on. And then after all of the IVF happened and it failed me. I just want to make that clear. It failed me. I did not fail it. It failed me. I think we sort of stopped talking to each other, actually. We didn't say anything about it. You know, we had a big kind of, obviously there was all the falling out at the time of the everything. And I can remember when I knew that, God, when I knew that it hadn't happened and it had, well, it took and I was pregnant and then miscarried again, and we went away to Wales, and I can remember following him around like a lost sort of sheep. Literally, I remember going to this place and he had bread pudding and custard. I hate bread pudding and custard, but I thought I'll have bread pudding and custard. I couldn't make a decision for myself. I literally had lost the ability to make a decision about anything at all. And he was sort of sorting out all my medication for me, all those sorts of things, and literally just having to sort of herd me around, literally. And yeah, I just was incapable of doing sort of anything, never mind sort of thinking about anything intimate or having a conversation about sex. And so it just sort of died, I think, because he was affected. He was worried, his words to me were he was worried he was going to hurt me. That was what it was. He was worried he was going to hurt me in some way, emotionally, physically, something. He worried about that consistent, just because I suppose I'd kind of fallen apart so often. And that was kind of why we ended the IVF, because I literally physically, and I think more importantly, mentally, we kind of agreed but didn't agree, but it came to sort of like a conclusion in that way that sometimes you sort of come to these conclusions that actually I won't be able to cope with it anymore. And that was kind of where we sat, and we did have sex, but it wasn't the same. And I still had those fears, those hang-ups, because it wasn't for me, it's not the getting pregnant. What I needed help was afterwards, was the support to keep the pregnancy, because my body just thinks it's an infection that it has to fight. My immune system's a bit screwy like that. And that kind of was the worst bit, because I was still obviously avoiding it. And I couldn't deal with the thing of, oh, well, I've got to go on the pill, because that just felt so odd and so weird, and I couldn't cope with that in my head. So mentally, nothing kind of joined up together. It was all a complete and absolute fuck up, really. And I think, yeah, just loneliness, actually, that I know I'm conscious that the three of us here have partners, and there'll be people listening who are not in relationships. And I sort of want to sort of reach out in some way to people, because it's so fucking lonely, that bit afterwards, that gap when you're sat in your silos trying somehow to work it all out. And I think that's so hard as well. That's so really, really tough too. Yeah, it's connection, isn't it? It's not just sex, it's that connection with somebody. And I think that probably is why I kind of went off the rails a lot, because I was completely lonely. Actually, I didn't quite know how to sort of say to to feel attractive because I was broken, to feel worthy, to feel like actually numerous times I said to my husband, well, go and find somebody else. Because we've got an age gap in our relationship that doesn't actually affect our fertility. It's me, not him. I sort of feel like I'd let him down in so many ways. Like, you could be off on a cruise with someone of your own age, and you kind of reach a point where you sort of want to give up work, and I'm still working, so I'm doing one thing, you're doing another. We're living these sort of parallel lives of doing different things, and I thought, oh God, I just let you down. But the difference, I think, for us was that I keep saying my husband, Ticker, is his name, Kenny, whatever, his real name, Ticker is what I call him. He's always known as Ticker. But he said to me that actually it was just the icing on the cake. It would have been nice to have had children, but it wasn't the be all and end all, which I think is such a relief when we finally had that conversation. But it took a while. We'd adopted the dog by then. I think of everything in dog years, but we'd adopted the dog by then. So, God, that must have been at least, I don't know, 2 years after, 2 years after, I think, maybe 2 years, and maybe another year after that. It was on holiday, and we just literally everything went into meltdown. And I can't think why. I don't necessarily think that it was what caused it. It just was, and I don't think I have a solution to things. But I think loneliness, conversation, isolation, they're all words I kind of want to pick out that are probably as important, if not more important, than actually the word sex, because that's only one thing that kind of is with everything else. Yeah,
I think part of the struggle I had about this, this episode was that it's not about the sex, because really it's about the intimacy.
Yeah.
It's about the loss of, I'll call it the magic. It's that, like you say, Sarah, it's another loss. I think you've actually put it perfectly. Excellent.
Yeah, it is. That's it. It's another loss. And I think you can kind of, sort of controversial, it's a bit of a controversial statement, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately in other stuff I've been doing outside the podcast, and about the similarities, the bits that polarize us from people who are parents, and the similarities, and that, I think anyone that turns around and says that, the sex life is great all the time, constantly, is actually a liar, because we're all affected by so many different things. And with parents, it's birth, it's having kids in the house. And I kind of find it quite insulting sometimes that actually that's not understood, that actually what we've been through is as life-changing, bigger life-changing, and this whole idea of having kids is life-changing. Yes, it's not life-changing. Of course it's life-changing. You have these responsibilities, your life changes, but likewise, none of us, whether we've arrived here because of life circumstances, by circumstance that is, or by medical, physical, whatever, why we're all here listening to the podcast and being part of the podcast, it's life-changing. Absolutely, utterly life-changing, and continues and stays life-changing all the time, because I don't think there's not one of us who hasn't thought, okay, I can just about hang on here. But I can remember all the times when I've suddenly felt myself pulled up sharp, and literally it's almost like a physical reaction to it, where I think, oh God, no, I'm not that person now. I don't have that potential to be a mother. Now it's gone, which is both alarming, but also sometimes it's a little bit, okay, well, at least I know that, because the not knowing is sometimes the worst of all. You're stuck in a hinterland of, well, maybe I keep trying. Maybe I go out and find someone. Maybe I go and just, maybe someone out there might be able to do this for me, or maybe there's a solution. That hinterland of, we're kind of going into trying to conceive and steering away from childlessness, but there is that thing. I think you can't talk about sex without talking about trying to conceive. And that hinterland of trying to conceive is, God, it's awful. It's just hideous. I think it's so much worse and so heartbreaking, almost compared to being childless.
is, I was commenting on someone the other day about this. You know, I work with people that are childless not by choice, and it's kind of, I commented on it and said the reason I do that is because I don't want to have to engage with that part of myself again that was trying. You know, that sort of, oh yeah, oh no, I fail, yeah, hope fail. And I said that for me, when I look back, you know, I had a line in the sand where it all went, no, this ain't happening. And I guess I kind of think about those people that weren't able to meet somebody, and it's the what ifs and maybes that must be the most difficult bit. So not just the loneliness, it's like, well, what if I'd done something different? What if I'd met somebody? What if I'd compromised? And that must be a really fucking shit place to be in, because at least, okay, I know my body let me down, but I've got that line in the sand, and I've not got any what ifs or maybes. So that must be, I would say that must be harder.
I think so. I have friends who are in that position who are coming up to their sort of mid-40s, and it's trying to, it's keeping in touch with them, but also just seeing the choices. They're not actually choices at the end of the day. It's heartbreaking. I kind of feel like I've almost sort of been in my situation too long to know and to give that full empathy that you try to give, but at the same time thinking that I've got well-loved friends who are quite likely heading into the same community as us you just want to fix it and try. You cannot do it, but I see it. I see some of the, you know, the freewheeling and the wheels falling off in them that I feel in what I'm, my past stuff, you know, I'm falling off the wagon, but then I had someone to go home to who was surprisingly unjudgmental about that. But I also see people with so much grace and care and peace. Not peace, but there's turmoil there, but they do this so gracefully. And that almost hurts as much, you know, to see that too, because it's, yeah, you're right, it's those compromises. You think, you know, what makes someone else worthy of somebody else for what actually is ultimately a very, very personal act, a very intimate act. We used that word intimate before, and I think that's it. It's incredibly intimate. Particularly, I think if you're saying it's all about the seed, it's all about conception, then it's who and what's their role, and if it worked, what would the outcome be? And maybe perhaps somewhere in all of that conversation is, well, have we lost sight of what happens if it works? Because I know I did. I got to that point where I thought, well, actually I can't quite remember what it was like to have the urge to be a mother. I lost it somewhere. It comes back, but I also kind of lost it somewhere because I was so focused on the end goal of getting pregnant, but I hadn't got to the point where I could think beyond 9 months, you know, about being a mother. And I actually got to the point where I thought, well, I probably don't deserve to be a mother, but actually it was my husband who deserved to be a father. My parents deserved to be grandparents, and my brother could be an uncle, and those were the things I thought would be. I didn't actually then start to think, oh, do I deserve, you know, I didn't correlate myself. I never actually, I think for a long time, and maybe still sort of bits of me now, think I never actually quite saw myself as being a parent. I lost that because I was so focused probably on the it working somehow. Somehow it would work. Yeah, I don't know. It's God, it's also complicated, isn't it?
Yeah. Michael, you look like you're going to say something.
Yeah, I guess I'm just going back to when you said, Sarah, about the single people around us. And it just, for me, I think about this may sound quite rude and disrespectful, but it's not meant that way. But when Vicky was when we were doing IVF, I have never seen Vicky more driven in her life than when she was going through that. And we've had this conversation, so it's not like I'm being disrespectful for her. And she said, well, that's because I wanted to give it every chance I could. I couldn't live with myself if I had doubt at the end of it. And I think it must, for those single people who just didn't even get the chance to have that situation, to give it the best they had, must be. My vocabulary fails me. I just can't think, what it would be like for them, But it also brings me to another thought about that loss of intimacy where you just become a machine. That's what Vicky was like. She was just an absolute machine. And yeah, it took its toll.
I think I felt like I was a vessel. I think I felt like a vessel at parts where I felt like I'd been stripped of every part of me. There was nothing left to be intimate about because, of course, there were people. I've been to all these clinics and it felt like everyone had seen parts of me. That wasn't just the parts. You're going through general anaesthetic. And you're feeling, I hate that kind of, not that, obviously everyone hates general anaesthetic. No one goes up and does it for fun or sedation, but it's just fact that you...
Sorry, but...
you
total sensory deprivation. I love it. It's good.
God. Every time I've had general anaesthetic, it's never been for a very good reason at all. But I think that vulnerability that you have when you go through something like that, with the sedation that I had on the last go, it was that vulnerability, and I hate that. I hate that loss of control. It's awful. It is just terrifying. And I think that was sort of it. I had to turn off everything I had in this sort of quest in order to disengage from myself. And I know that you guys have seen me do it, and I've done it so many times where I've drawn this line across from my neck, and I literally, because I most people probably know this, but I did an Open University degree whilst going through IVF, because it was my brain was working. I had a bit of my brain functioned, because the job that I was in wasn't fulfilling, but I stayed in it because I thought, well, at least I get maternity pay, and yeah, I just studied because I thought that would kind of, maybe I would seek some sort of connection, I suppose. And I guess it was, disengagement. So actually, you're right, Michael. It is that complete sensory literally turn everything off. Become this machine, become a vessel, whatever you want to call it. You disengaged with sex. Literally disengage with it. It becomes a thing. It's over there. We have to do it. And here's the timetable. And it's like now. And going back to opportunities as well was that we were fortunate that we were able to have that opportunity. Well, fortunate, I don't know. I don't regret what we did. We tried. But at least we could, because we paid for it, because we didn't have treatment. There was no treatment here. It wasn't on the NHS at the time. So we had to pay for it. But that also caused this great chasm, because Ticker was working. He did all the hours that he could. The job that he was in, he got paid overtime. So he worked Saturdays and Sundays. Didn't often come to appointments, because if there was overtime, he took it, because that basically paid for the treatment. bits fell off the house because we didn't pay for, we couldn't afford to do stuff on the house. So we were living in sort of a house that was sort of falling apart to a degree. And, and it all has an impact, I think, somewhere along the line, and it creates more isolating. It's not just, it's that communication and the isolation that comes about too, making those sort of decisions. You end up sort of sometimes doing alone when you really ought to do it together. I remember kind of, I don't want to sort of go too much into IVF, but I do remember kind of like when they did all the things like, the embryos go back, and we were in, it's just so kind of crazy, but we were in this room in this clinic in Bourne Hall, which has a great big ballroom. The ballroom at Bourne Hall is a long story, but it's like, oh my God, I'm in a fucking ballroom in Bourne Hall, with all these other people, and what the hell am I doing here? But yeah, in the clinic, and we had the embryos go back, and you can pick your music. So what music would you like? What the fuck? I don't know. I've got no idea. What, kind of like, let's get some Barry White on. Come on. Whilst we're all standing around. But they gave you the choice of the music. Well, I don't know. Whatever it is, I never want to hear it again. I could not tell you what it was, because we were just like, no, we don't know. But apparently that is a thing that people do also. A great respect to you if you've done that. But I was just so thrown by it. And all I could think of at the time was like, Barry White or something. I don't know. A bit of Marvin Gaye. Sexual healing. It was just like, this is just so strange. And of course it becomes then this weird sort of thing. I'm sure that I'm right with that account. You think, God, was I just too whacked out of it at the time on Christ knows what medication? Did I? But I'm quite sure that they asked us, because we had done a few times. I'm quite sure that's an accurate memory of that. I'm kind of interested if anybody else has had that memory too, but it's something I just remember from that too.
I remember. It must be a thing for, like, I don't know, if you pay for it. I mean, this is different, it's dental. But they said to me, what music do you want while you're having a root canal? And I was like, for fuck. So I said to him, I'd like Metallica, please. And I made him play the whole fucking Metallica album, the Black Album. I was just like, for fuck's sake, music. What are you talking about?
It's just I do remember not listening to music though when I was grieving, just as a digression. I couldn't listen to it. I listened to I had nothing in the car at that holiday in Wales, and we were kind of all falling apart. I don't remember listening to any music. I couldn't, because I knew I'd associate it with it.
Isn't it strange? I mean, it's sort of so we're talking about sex and intimacy, and people sort of go, oh well, you're childless. That just means you haven't got kids, and it's like, there's so much more to it than that, isn't there? When you start sort of just edging around the surface of it, it's like, it's not just that, the loss of the children that we were meant to have, it's all the other stuff that goes with it, and people don't see it, do they?
There is so much more. I'm gone for hours, I think, about this, because it's just huge. Should we look at some of the prompts? Because we did have people that came in and sent us some comments.
Yes.
As well. So do you want me to read them out? Shall I read them out? I'm going to read them all out anonymously, because I think that's respectful to those who have done so. And thank you ever so much. It's just actually quite gratifying and reassuring to know that actually people are listening, and also have some comments that have given us some prompts, but also that people feel the same as us too. And this is somebody who's sent something in on our emails and said that it's quite early days since my husband and I have decided to stop trying with IVF. I'm nearly 44. It seriously affected my mental health. We decided to put our relationship first. However, I find I've lost all sexual desire and drive. In the 9 months since our last IVF failure, we may have had sex twice, maybe 3 times. I just don't feel anything that way. I have no desire or excitement that way. I know it's partly because I hate my body. I feel useless and disgusting, but also it became so clinical during the 4 years of trying. I've forgotten how to enjoy it. I don't want this to come between us. I need to start to try to rediscover it and like myself more and feel desirable. How have others got through it? I really thought this was just me. I don't want a sexless marriage in my mid-40s, but I feel useless at sex. Thank you for discussing this. my voice is starting to wobble because, God, I can relate to so much of that. I really, really can. I'm actually just, really can.
I know what you mean. Well, I mean, we kind of talked about it before, didn't we? We all said that we've been impacted by it and the loss of that, the magic, as Michael called it. But I guess there are no, I think it would be crass of us to sit here and say, well, you want to do this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
Because it's deeper than just, it's not just your physical, is it? It's all the other stuff, as we said. It's the mental and the liking yourself and feeling that you deserve it, and that takes time.
It's a certain degree of forgiving, I think, as well.
Yeah.
This strikes me from the letter The Useless and Disgusting, when actually it took me a long time to work out that I have days when I think that still, you know, despite the podcast, despite kind of other things, you do get days and you think that. But I think it's that, talk an awful lot about healing in our community, and there's no magic wand because there's so many different ways to do it. And the things that I kind of like poo-pooed before and thought that's not going to work did actually work, got me somewhere. But I think it's, you learn to grow around your grief, and it's a grief, the loss of, as you say, that word, the loss, and a loss of an element of a partnership, of a marriage, and a part of your life that you had before that will never really be the same. And there's no magic one, like you say, to sort of come to terms with that. But for me, it was about, God, it's 10 years and still work in progress, of actually connecting my mind up with my body again and feeling worthwhile. A good, feeling that I meant something to somebody, even if I didn't know that was myself. And that's tough. But I think a lot of it is around communication and talking and sharing, and that can often make things worse before they get better. Did for us, particularly and I, we got worse before we got better, a lot worse, literally to the point of splitting up worse before we got better. And that's scary. It's a scary place to go to.
It is, because on top of losing the children that you wanted, the thought of losing your relationship as well is really fucking terrifying. And what I'd say the same, we got worse before we got better because I didn't want to talk about it. And I recognise, that disgust word when you thought like, well, I don't work. So I recognise it, and the connection of the brain to the body again is just so important. I did the same. I always call it living from the neck up. So that's what I did. I didn't engage with my body. My body was just something that I inhabited, but it takes time, and it takes learning to be a bit gentle with yourself as well, because it may be something random takes you back to liking yourself. So it could be something you did as a kid or something that you enjoyed before all the shit show happened, but it's personal to you. So for us to sit there and go, do this, that just won't happen. But you will find it. You will find what works for you.
I think sometimes exploring some of the groups that there are around and what other people are up to, and role models as well, that can help. I started I think looking for other role models, positive role models, just to give you just a little bit of a clue that there's life after all of this. Because I think if one's life has been so wrapped up in the trying and in people around you who have tried and quite likely maybe have gone on to have a child, then you end up in a place where it can feel very isolating. But I'm looking at other role models out there who sit with their grief, I think, rather than deny it, but sit with it. And they are, you have to sit and exist with that.
Yeah, not easy.
No, it's not easy at all. I wish our listener well. I really do. Keep in touch with us.
I hope this helps. The fact that we do even before we sort of read out your lovely words and your pain, that you realise that we've all been through it, and we're all trying, we've all talked about it.
Yeah, there'll be good days, bad days.
Yeah.
But it's very, very personal, that road to recovery.
Definitely.
You and your husband as well, and how you are, and I hope Michael's words from male perspective help as well, because I think that actually has helped me this morning.
Yeah.
We're not viewed differently. If we are, it's a temporary state, because it's both of you grieving different ways, but it's still a shared grief.
That was an uncomfortable pause. Don't worry, we can cut that out.
Yeah.
Just makes you think, though, doesn't it? It makes you very reflective, I think, talking about this.
Yeah,
it does. That's all I'm doing right now is just yeah. What does it mean for me? Thinking back about certain circumstances, certain times, I should say. Yeah, and like you say, it's when I first heard that that message, that bloke part of me is going, right, now this is what you do, and then
Yeah.
and then I've got to stop. What? Just it is a real personal journey. But if I think about my experience, or our experience, I should say, communication was a lot of that. It was a lot of, where are you sitting right now? And so part of our recovery was 10 years on a psychologist's couch. And, I don't think we ever talked about intimacy then, but it gave us the courage and the tools to talk about it, in our own private time. And so that's why, I can talk about those things that I said earlier, that, because they are things that we have talked about, And for me, again, it just, that I think the loss of intimacy is extremely underestimated. It's extremely underestimated.
It's not just a case of like a date night and buy some sexy underwear,
no,
which is I've seen advised on so many times in
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I can't remember who it was. It was something that I'd read somewhere on some pointless magazine when I used to read magazines, and now I don't. Life's so much better when you don't. But it was, someone had said, I've been through all this stuff, and date nights and invest in yourself and buy some nice underwear. What the hell?
Oh.
You've never been through that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about, from where we sat, it's about, well, first of all, you've got to love yourself.
Yeah. You've got to want to go into the underwear shop in the first place. That sounds like some kind of like metaphor, but it is. It's the getting out of that. I think that's what I could have just thought this time was, you've got to get out of bed, get dressed, maybe put a bit of slap on, get out of the house. Then you've got to try somehow to negotiate your way to the underwear shop to make a decision to buy something. How the hell on... Nah. And as for a date night, that's just, oh God, because that makes my toes curl in a really horrible way.
Well, so it's also, I mean, I've got scars all over my abdomen. I don't really, you know what I mean? I still feel funny about my abdomen being smothered in scars. I sometimes look at it and think, oh God, that looks awful. I don't like looking at it, and I think, I wonder what my other half thinks. So it's not, me putting on a bit of flashy underwear is not really going to solve my issues with my appearance, is it? It's
not really.
What bollocks that is. Pardon my French, sorry.
Before we start swearing,
cut that out, Michael. That sounds racist. Sorry.
No, actually, no. This is actually a good conversation from a positive perspective, I think, because I think it's important that that you've said, I wonder what my other half thinks about that. He probably doesn't see it.
No, I guess not.
And look, I know this might sound a bit flippant, but have you ever seen, what's that movie with Pauline, what's her name, is Educating Rita?
Oh,
okay. Are you thinking of Educating Rita or Shirley Valentine?
No, it might be Shirley Valentine. So
the one where she goes to Greece.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I know that one.
I want sex in the morning and sex at breakfast and sex at dinner.
Shirley Valentine, yeah. I knew it was one of those. And she is petrified about getting her belly out because she has stretch marks. And what he said was, and I'm not trying to be, I don't want this to be flippant, but he didn't see those. He saw a woman, a real woman. So I know we said we wouldn't, give advice, but I just want to give from a male's perspective what I don't want to put words in your husband's mouth, but I would pretty much believe that he probably doesn't see them.
Oh, fair enough. You'd have to be blind, but yeah, okay. I mean, I take the view that you're sort of saying, well, it's what's important to me.
They're part of you.
Yeah.
But they're not important to him.
Okay.
They are not there to sway his decision about if you are, that will not sway his intimacy.
Oh, okay.
I'm just trying to be, without getting too crass, but
no, I know.
It won't sway him. They're not important to him. And maybe I'm generalising. Sorry, so I don't want to make it sound like I'm
apologise.
But that's the way that I would feel.
It's more about it's about the love that you have for somebody as opposed to kind of the physical thing. Yeah,
I guess so.
And so what might be absolutely and rightly so important to you, Sarah, may not be important to him because he doesn't see those.
Interesting perspective, isn't it?
It's
I have to ask him.
Yeah.
Never actually asked him.
Because there are things that Vicky doesn't feel comfortable about her own body. And so
I guess
that's not what it's about.
I think it's a female thing, isn't it? We kind of brought up to have this ideal body, and when we don't, it's like that becomes the focus.
I become so self-conscious of my body because I was probably the first girl in our school to wear a bra. And I very conscious of that. Really, really self-conscious, I think, even to this day, of having curves. And actually, to be honest, that's an awful lot of the reason why I sort of hid behind to wear my dad's old jumpers and stuff at school, sixth form and stuff like that, and at uni, just to kind of like hide myself away. But I've had a hugely difficult relationship with my body. So drawing attention to it and saying to Kenny, well, does it matter? These things that make up who I am. And actually, we've had that conversation, and no, it didn't. Because I thought the reason that we stopped having sex was because he went off me. Because he internalised everything, didn't want to talk about it because he thought anything he said would come out wrong. Yeah. A way that sometimes they do. But actually, it was ultimately when it got down to sort of really talking about it, he was just worried he was going to hurt me.
Yeah.
It wasn't that he'd gone off me, despite, all the stuff that I put us both through. They hadn't gone off me. It wasn't that. And actually sometimes these things are incremental. It's not like we suddenly woke up one morning and all got old, or we woke up one morning and suddenly, there were these scars, or it wasn't that, I woke up one morning and was suddenly dramatically under or overweight.
Yeah.
They're incremental, therefore they're not so obvious. What we think is happened overnight, because our memories can play all those tricks on us, and the whole journey of going from one point where sex was fun and you got carpet burns, to where it becomes difficult is incremental. It doesn't happen there's no one night, that was the last night that we did that and it was fun. And there wasn't actually a point that comes to that. It's a gradual incremental thing that sort of happens. And maybe there's an argument to say that it's a way of capturing that and going, okay, well, we're getting to that point where it's getting clinical, or we're getting to that point where actually this is not fun anymore, and how do we stop that? And I think benefit of hindsight would say, oh yeah, okay, we can do that. But actually, truth is, I think if we all went back to, I don't know, those years and lived through it again, God forbid, we probably wouldn't catch those moments. You just don't.
No.
Yeah, you don't realise it's happening. Yeah,
because I would say that I'm starting to formulate this idea in my head. Well, no, from experience, that I'm sure there was a period of numbness for quite a long time, because we've identified that we have this massive loss, and then how you get to the point that we are all at, be it medical or IVF or circumstance. But well, I'd like to hear from someone who's circumstance. But there's that period of numbness where, what does this all mean? And like you said, Berenice, that then you start to feel isolated. You start to feel alone, because we don't even in a couple, you just not, fuck, how do we work this out? Where do we go from here?
It charms so much. I mean, I've got so few memories of that period of time. They've got little snapshots of, oh, this happened, then this happened. And I remember sort of talking to people about it and saying, well, that happened, then that happened, then that happened. And I thought, I don't remember anything else. I don't have any memories at all around that time. My counsellor head says, well, that's a trauma reaction, but it weirds me out how little I remember. So sex was the last, sex and intimacy were the last things on my mind. Because you're like, I'm shut down. I'm just trying to survive at the moment. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Most definitely. And I think that communication part is, it's about rediscovering yourself, rediscovering each other, but also, being open and honest with each other, so that you all understand where you're at, so that then you can start to rediscover that intimacy. You can get through that numbness, but also the conversation that we've just had about, how do we view each, we've gone through this traumatic time in our life, and how do we view each other now? So you can get that straight, so so from my perspective, I knew it was important to so that Vicky still felt desirable, felt like a that was come across sexist, but felt like a woman, and all those things, and I saw that as my role in this. But again, those tools were gained from the help that we got. I'm not saying that I'm some Carl Jung that's come up with it straight away, but those tools to communicate were, because I'm sure we can all imagine that if you get stuck in that phase of numbness, then it just gets worse until something breaks.
I think even last year I was probably in some point with that too, because it's not. I don't think you sort of suddenly get to a point where you're okay. Pandemic, I think, is a contributory factor to that. But sort of very much aware that at some point during the course of last summer, I was sort of starting to get sort of into bad sort of habits, and then I've actually been calling it reclaiming. I actually called it a reclamation of who I was before. I'm not who I was before. That's probably the wrong thing, but reclaiming something back by actually just thinking, okay, what matters? And yeah, I've dropped so many different things that I used to do that I know were quite bad, and just in trying to come to terms with my grief as well. And it actually was a conversation that I had with Bindi Shah, who was a guest on the podcast a while ago, that was partly to do with that when she started doing the meditation and about the self-care, what contributes to self-care. And I'd realised that, sort of not neglecting those things, but hadn't really termed them as self-care. So just reading a book, having a bath, all very simple self-care things, going out in the garden, doing something that you want to do, going meditating, yoga, that sort of thing, self-care. And I thought, oh, okay, that's where it is. And actually just taking some time away from everybody else to do something for me on my own that involves nobody else whatsoever. I'm not reliant on my husband, I'm not reliant on the dog, I'm not relying on friends. This is me doing something and just actually being okay with being alone, because I got very bad at being alone. If I was here on my own, I had a lot of time on my own because of my husband working silly hours and things. And I didn't sit with it after a while. I couldn't do it, whereas I used to before. So I'd go out, I'd go and spend money on pointless things I didn't really need. And just getting used to perhaps not doing that, but also being okay with just sitting and doing a bit of self-care. And the meditation certainly helps in connecting everything back up again. So I felt in a position where I could reclaim who I was, but also get a bit more comfortable with the fact that I've lost weight. And I'm actually smaller, thinner, less weight than I had before I started IVF. And that's been really weird. It's been really, 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 really odd and strange experience that I can't quite yet articulate. I don't quite know how I feel about that. But I've got to sort of this time of my life where I'm thinking, oh, I'm okay, I'm acceptable. But with that comes a bit of kind of self-flagellation about the fact that why didn't you do this earlier? Too. It's living around the grief, I suppose, of everything, not thinking, growing around it as opposed to it sort of dominating who I am. But it's a weird feeling. It brings up all sorts of weird issues about things, about, perception of oneself as well. It's odd. Do you want to go to our next prompt that we had?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? So this is one so it's a friend of mine who is a parent wanted to ask. She said it's simply that it must have been very insulting to have people commenting and offering help. But in a previous podcast, Berenice mentioned having a man offer to help father her children. Has anybody else experienced that, and how does that make it feel? Is that actually a common thing that happens to people? I can't speak for everybody else, but it only happened once. How'd that make my husband feel? I felt insulted. I didn't tell Kenny. There you go. It's a very simple answer. I didn't, but I suspect it probably happens maybe quite a lot. It's very insulting because it's private. I don't know how this person, I forget the context of it, whether they actually knew because I'd said or something, I don't know. Or they made an assumption. I forget. I doubt I would have told them. I can't imagine telling them, but word gets around. Maybe people start to make those assumptions that they do. You've been married for a while and we haven't had a kid, and maybe they make 2 and 2 and make 5, or in this instance probably did make 4 and then made an assumption that was uncalled for. But yeah, I know I didn't tell him at all. That's not fair. but it was very insulting, very rude. They're not in my life anymore. But I don't know how common it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if anybody had said that to me, I would have smacked them into the middle of the next decade. I think that's just outrageous, isn't it?
I think it caught me unawares. I was just, like with life, you know, we all do that. We always think, oh, I'd have done this. I'd have done that if I'd have thought about it. But I was so gobsmacked that someone would even have the audacity to say such a thing. I think I was just floored by it.
Wow.
You know, I really thought, did I hear that right? Did I actually hear that right? That someone is commenting really on the fact that actually technically you're A, not doing it right, and B, my sperm's better than you. And I think the insult that the wide just said was that I wouldn't think that you were capable yourself of fathering anyone slightly sane, something like that. You know, what the hell would I want to do that for? You know, ew, God, unsuitable person. You know, if that's what you think, you know, it's not that simple.
Wow.
Reflected, like with all these comments, I think they reflect far worse on the person that makes them than the person who receives them.
I guess so, but it's just such a triggering thing, isn't it? I mean, I don't well, I'll be honest with you, I don't think anybody would have done it to me. I was really spiky when I was going through this. So if someone had come up to me and said that, I would have got a mouthful, but it's just the presumption of it.
Like you said, the triggering of it too, because I think it was one of the few occasions when I did go out. You know, as Vicky and Michael probably know, it's IVF clips your wings incredibly. You know, you can't go out and do things because you're always sort of doing something, and you've got to get back home by 5 to stick a needle in your stomach or something. So you don't often go out, and then when you do, you've got to avoid this trigger thing. So yeah, it was one of those things, a very brief kind of going out, and then thought, well, I'm just not going to go out again because people are shit. Really, mostly.
What do you reckon, Michael?
I must admit that comment doesn't surprise me. I'm trying to I'm racking my brain about if anyone ever said that to me, but where I previously worked, it was a totally male-dominated environment, and you know, if we're talking from an educational point of view, you know, we had quite a range of people. I think that's probably a nice way of putting it. And so it doesn't surprise me, because I can imagine guys flippantly saying something like that. I'm not making excuses for them. It's not right. But what I remember a time when at this same place, I think I was talking about, you know, how difficult it was for Vicky and I. And the best someone could say to me was, mate, all I've got to do is put my trousers on the bedpost and she's pregnant. You know, and that bit hard. And so is it just because people, I was thinking, no, look, he obviously doesn't understand. You know, I don't think he was in a place of malice. But, yeah, look, again, it's just another facet of how important it is for our community to try and educate those around us that these flippant remarks can be, you know, quite incisive and damaging.
Yeah, but I think also it's talking about them just goes to show that, you know, both you and I have experienced something like that in different forms, but it's not that unusual that they are these idiots, these dicks out there who do say these things that they really shouldn't be saying them. And actually, going back to what we always say in the podcast, you're not alone. it happens, that people do have these judgments. And I think that's kind of what my friend was saying. It was, I think, when we shared these comments just before we were doing the podcast, so we had some time to reflect ourselves before we talked about them. And my comment to Michael and Sarah was, I think she means random advice from people, not that I'm propositioned. Because that's not what it is. It's just random advice. I think that's what it is. It's almost that bit where I think some people don't quite remember to take the brain doesn't quite engage with the mouth somewhere along the line. And sometimes you see it, I think, with keyboard warriors. But sometimes you do meet people that do say these things. And yeah, there is an engagement, I think, with that. I don't think those sorts of people listen, but maybe some of them do. And it's nice to actually have a comment as well from someone who actually is a parent who conceive naturally, but actually listens to the podcast. So we are making those bridges as well. So 2 more to go. Do you want the next prompts that we've got through?
Let's go.
Okay. All right.
We're on a roll.
We are, aren't we? We're putting the world to rights. We're doing well today. Second observation was from a business coach who said he's realising how rude and intimate it is to start intros by saying one is a parent. It's like saying, I've spread the fruit of my loins. Ooh, that's interesting. I do think that I have to someone who does inhabit kind of these worlds of kind of like networking groups and things for my own business. And I think it's probably something we'll talk about in another episode. I think we'll probably talk about this maybe on the Saturday's World Childless Week. We're doing the webinar about working it out. But there is that thing, isn't there, of like, I'm I don't know. I'm trying to think of a name now because I can't use my own name. I'm Emma and I'm a mother of 3. I've given birth. Look at me. It's like the car sticker, isn't it? On the back of the car. Yeah, it's a bit, isn't it? Look at me, I've done this thing. That said, though, it's not always obvious what the journey to parenthood is. It could be adoption, it could be other means, could also be someone who's been through IVF as well. So it's not always quite so simple, but it does, I think most people do say that kind of, you could be fertile.
I think it's difficult. I was talking weirdly, randomly, to my hairdresser the other day, and he was talking about, so he is a parent, and he was sort of saying for guys, he said, most guys in the UK, you get together and they start talking about football. It's almost like what do they call it? A lingua franca. It's just it's kind of assumed that everybody's into football. And he said, I can't stand football. I have no interest. And so he said, when a guy starts wittering at me about football, I switch off or I change the subject. He said, it must be the same for you when somebody comes up and goes, I'm a parent of blah, blah, blah. How many, have you got kids? It's kind of a lingua franca moment, assumption that everyone has kids. So he said, it must be difficult for you to then sort of stop that, because then you lose that connection. Because he said, the guy that's into football will generally go, ow, and either turn away or, fold his arms, or they'll come up with something. But he said, going from kids to, no, I don't have children, he said, I can see that would cut the conversation dead.
And it's also creating a judgment as well, isn't it? Because actually you're revealing something of yourself, which is either we had sex, it didn't work out, I don't have sex, or I couldn't have children because something's broken, or there is you're saying something about yourself. And I think that's always been my reticence, is that I don't answer people with that now. I depends on kind of what sort of mood I'm in as to how kind of like shirt I am. Sometimes it's, well, that's a bit personal, isn't it? Or sometimes I'll say, no, my children died. Or which is an awful thing to say actually. But I just think, come on, just it depends on how irritating they are. I wouldn't recommend that one, but I tend to just thankfully quite a few groups that I belong to now, where because I'm open about the fact that we've got this podcast and it's what I do and people can listen if they want to. People get to know that I don't, and the narrative has changed. People don't do that now. I would leave groups like that now. I've made this decision as well that these award schemes that they have, and if there's now a category where it's got a mother category, then I just don't want to don't want to get involved. That's it. Goodbye. Don't want to kind of support that kind of narrative anymore in any way, even if it was like, award for another category. I just don't do that anymore. It's now, if I'm asked or commented on, then no, don't do it. I don't want to, because I think it's just buying into a narrative that shouldn't be encouraged anymore. We're women. We're not mothers. There's better language out there to use.
I'm just not interested. I just don't care. You're going to sit there and bond over being a mother. I have no fucking interest. I've left groups for, not because of award ceremonies, but because they're just like, all they talk about is their kids, and it's like, there's no room for me here. I
remember going to a wedding once with some people that the landlords of our local pub, and they had this great wedding, it was in their pub. But I can remember my husband went off with all his mates, talking about football. They worked together at some point as well, so they had their conversation, and I'd worked with them too, because we'd all been in the same thing. And I got sort of sat with the wives, and the children. And when I went and talked to the men, because I knew them better, actually, because we'd worked together, I was seen as some sort of threat. Even though actually I had my husband, thinking, do you think I'm that easy? And because I hadn't had children, and at that point it wasn't obvious, we hadn't said a word about it. It just wasn't. So there I was, married, but to then maybe I'd have seen as sort of slightly fertile, maybe slightly loose cannon because I was younger. I fitted nowhere. I fitted absolutely nowhere in this wedding party at all. And actually ended up, I suppose, been mildly, vaguely sort of assaulted by someone there who got a bit drunk and had a thing about big tits, and it was awful. The whole thing was awful. I remember just going home just thinking I just didn't fit anywhere in the world. Wow. Because I couldn't talk to the guys. Eventually my husband was there and he came and sort of found me, but he'd left me to go and talk to them, and I was just happened to be in this position where I was on my own, and it wasn't that this guy groped me without my husband intervening. It's just that he wasn't in the room, he was somewhere else. Luckily somebody else intervened, but it was, well, I intervened, it was like, do that and I'm gonna fucking, yes, there's parts of you that are vulnerable. But again, it's, he was a married man, kids. You think really, just to prove the point that actually those that do breed aren't always the most intelligent, I think. But it was just awful situation to be in because he just didn't fit anywhere. Because you're also seen, I think if people don't know your story, you can also be seen perhaps maybe as a threat too. I think that's also something, if you're not public about these things. Nobody's business really, actually, at the end of the day, I don't think.
Nice. No, probably not.
Sorry, I went off into a different digressive rant there. It just come back to me. I just thought, yeah, I remember that. Oh, right, I'm not traumatised by it. It was quite nice to get angry and just to knee this known idiot. Known. It was very known to people as being just particularly awful. But yeah, to be able to sort of give him short shrift and a bit of a knee in the, well, rather violent knee in the bollocks, but still. He deserved it. Yeah. I also had heels on, quite spiky ones, was able to do possibly some damage to his foot. He was limping anyway, which is nice to see. Personally, it's actually the emotional side, all joking aside, yeah, the emotional sort of impact of that. Again, that isolation as well. I keep coming back to that too. Yeah, that's why it's important, I think, that, not that I'd want to sit with them again, and share anything like that with these women, but I think also just to sort of realise that not everyone's on your side. Actually, life's too short. Get friends around you that do support you, that you feel comfortable with. Yeah. Last one then, about sex and connections. Oh.
We've kind of done that.
We've done this in a way. I think lastly, not about sex but connections and building what was lost, engaging with each other as part nights. Is it as easy as date nights? No. Is there anything you've done that's not sex? Not expecting you to share that much detail. Thank you. That's helped to build bridges. Is it self-love, self-worth? This is from someone who listens to our podcast who identifies as bisexual. So,
I'd like to say date nights, and I'm not known for my romanticism, so I think it's a load of bollocks, because it takes me right back to being that machine. It takes me back to being that. Okay, so Vicky reminded me. She says, make sure you get in there that the time when you have to say to your boss, I've got to go home and shag the wife because it's the right time. So I've got to go home from work. I left about 15 minutes to the car park, 20 minutes to go home. I won't embarrass myself and say how long it took, but then back to work. And, as I said earlier, the magic goes. Mm-hmm. And that date night thing just triggers me straight back to that. Mm. It's a mechanical thing, that doesn't have any magic in it. It's not that, Saturday afternoon matinee that I've talked about. It's yeah. Sorry, you probably get what I'm talking about there. So yeah, date night. No, from my opinion, avoid it like the plague.
So what has helped you and Vicky build bridges that's not to do with sex, but other things that you have done? Did I just go heck like that? Heck.
You did it. Heck.
Did I? Heck. Oh, no.
Oh, it's like my teacher at school going, hex.
I was so like, oh my God, I'm not going to say. Ticker said to me, said, you're going to do the heck. Everyone does that. It's just like, oh, I'm so glad I did that. I had to do it once. Anyway, yes.
Yes.
Back to the question. Shall I show my question again? So what else did you and Vicky do that was not sex that built bridges together for you? And we'll go around and we'll perhaps share something between all of us around us.
Again, yeah, just being able to talk. That is the most important thing from my perspective. So it's like, so, when she is at her lowest and saying, oh, I'm not a woman, I don't feel like a woman, and just saying, that's not what I see. There's a quote that I pull out now and again that I stick onto my social media. I like to think that I made it, and it's around, the intention is a woman saying, all I see is flaws. And the reply is, well, all I see is beauty. And it's being able to talk about that, and being able to love yourself, to take that in, and being able to go, at least in your own mind, thank you, that take that in, and and trust what comes your way, because you've been through a lot. You've been through a load of shit, and you find it really hard to trust, yourself, those around you, just life itself. You need to be able to trust what comes your way. And that's part of that communication. It's being able to say, yeah, okay, you might see a little bit of belly fat there, but that's not what I see. I see a woman, and they're my examples about that communication. It's about, and that doesn't happen overnight, but it'll work eventually. That communication. I'll shut up, or I'll just ramble.
No, that was great. I love that, because it is about building up that self-esteem again, isn't it? When
it is,
the other person's just absolutely crumbled.
Yeah, it is, and it's, I guess too, it's also to recognise that it's about the when you've got that numb period where you just, you've lost, I don't know, for some people it could be years of their life. It's about rebuilding that back up. Like you say, your own self-esteem. I don't want to use the word finding yourself because I don't like that phrase, but it's about recreating yourself, and I think that can work for both in different ways, for us all, be it single, be it a partnership. Obviously, it will be different, but yeah. That's my takeaway.
Love it. Yeah. Shall I go next?
Yeah, you can. I'm just sitting here thinking I've no idea what to say, but yeah.
It's so difficult, isn't it?
In a nutshell. How do we follow Michael? What he said.
I think mine sort of ties in a little bit because I think the self-esteem is so important. It's not just for sex; it's like for everything, isn't it? If you've got, I remember hitting rock bottom, and that's the realization when your self-esteem's just gone. There isn't any. But I think for me, and I kind of for couples, maybe for people that aren't in a couple as well, I think it was sitting with the fact that actually not everything has to do with sex and intimacy. Kind of rebuilding yourself and your partnership and getting in touch with what actually is enjoyable, because everything becomes really grotty and dirty, doesn't it, when you've been spat out the back of something and you're numb, you're struggling. I think it's finding things that you can actually engage with. And for us, I mean, it sounds weird, but walking around zoos became a thing because it was just removed. And yes, there were kids there, but we'd try and plan it so that it was, to get there first thing, so it wasn't busy. But it just became something that we could kind of engage with, but not too deep. You know what I mean? It was something that we could do together that we enjoyed on a very sort of basic level, and just building up from there, really. It was not doing anything groundbreaking or earth-shattering, like trying something new. It was just simple pleasures. And that's kind of, I remember us doing that a lot. We don't go to zoos now so much, but it became a thing for a long time.
Actually, I think, sorry to jump back in, I'm on a roll. But no, you've reminded me about the whole travel gig thing that Vicky and I really enjoy. And that is it too. That is just a simple pleasure, but it's also away from everything. It's something totally different. It's away from everything. And we were in a position where we could do it. It's not everyone's cup of tea, and may not be able to afford it. But now I think about it, that was actually a massive, massive bonus for us to be away and to actually be normal again, if that makes sense. So one of the things that I think about is, like, Vicky's quite shy and timid, so she's not one to start a conversation with strangers. But when we go overseas, she's someone else. And so shops in America, buying pizza in Rome. And remember, Vicky's a true Skippy, so she's only ever spoke, Australian. She's not spoke anything else. But she had to go at getting pizza in Rome. When we come to the UK, my sister's always saying, Vicky, we don't do that. We just don't talk to strangers in the shop here or things like that. But now it just makes a lot of sense that we've just been able to be us, away from the baggage that sits around, here, if that makes sense.
Completely. I think that's what the zoos was about. It's kind of removing ourselves, looking at something else, and sort of parking all the bullshit that had been around us for so long. Oh, I love that. I love that we've both got an example that sort of marries.
Yeah. We might be onto something here.
Yeah, hell yeah. Right, your turn, Berenice.
Berenice.
No pressure.
Oh God, I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm gonna. I suppose maybe the dog is a part of it. Maybe I think probably Molly is a part of everything, because we were sort of. Well, I was like, I want a dog. I want a dog. I want a dog. I want a dog. And Kenny's like, oh, I'm not sure about that. But actually, I think I'm just going to go back to what I said before, which is actually starting to sort of know myself a bit more, and actually coming out of that and starting to know me, and to sit with being on my own and not having to sort of worry about that. And I do get days when my thoughts go a bit wonky and I'm not great at it still. But I think trying not to be scared of those thoughts and trying not to get too kind of carried away. I think, to me, holidays aren't sort of a thing. I find them difficult. I think a lot of miscarriages and holidays were kind of around treatment. So I find that difficult. And I sometimes find that actually going away and then coming back, not that I don't dislike my home. I love my house very much and I love where I live very much. But I find it sometimes difficult to come back. So I was kind of, and I still am, sort of work in progress, I think, on where I am here, because to me, the 350, 60 days, whatever that you live, where you live, for me was important to have a sense of peace with that before thinking about going away and doing other things. But Molly makes that easier in some respects, because, you know, for me, actually, just a real simple thing of just going up to the beach with the dog, walking on the beach with her and with Kenny, and we do things like I look for turd-shaped stones for my goddaughter as well. We collect turd-shaped stones and stones with holes in the middle as well. We get quite just stones with holes in the middle. We call them holy stones. Someone that I know who is quite deeply religious thought that we actually meant they were blessed stones. No, they're just stones with holes in the middle, but we call it the Holy Stone Collection. So stupid things like that, but just where you sort of end up with this sort of sense of humour, I think, you know, and try and sort of find something that works. And in fact, some of those beaches are beaches I walked on in my lowest state, and just trying to reclaim a bit of that back. But I don't know that I've got anything sort of magic that helped us. Maybe in a way, perhaps the pandemic did, because we were forced to have to sort of sit and do stuff. But every day at 3:30, unless there's football on or something like that, then we'll go out in the garden with the dog as well, to spend some time out there. And that's kind of like a thing guided specifically by a howling hound who will not let us rest until we've been out in the garden and we've done these things. So that's something that's kind of brought us together. But I don't think there's anything much. I think a lot of it's still sort of related to sort of mental health and recovery, really. And I think that's all part of it. And finding a bit of peace. Weird stuff, reclaiming bits of the house, redecorating parts of the house. I can't remember if I must have said it on the podcast before, about the chairs in the living room, and realising that the chairs are actually quite a big trigger for me, and having to reclaim back the house a bit from where it was before. Still work in progress, but, you know, just actually that was very cathartic to do. Although I am eyeing up another sofa at the moment. I've got a bit of a sofa crush going on, a bit worrying that. But anyway, but yeah, you know, that whole kind of idea of just claiming back some of your house and getting, and almost like a sort of an exorcism, I think, of some things as well is good. Because Kenny said, you know, if we did move, those ghosts would probably stay with me. This is the thing. Yeah. And I remember him saying that and thinking, yeah, there's no guarantee that if you kind of upended yourself and went and go, oh, I want to live somewhere like, I don't know, in Cornwall or somewhere by the sea or whatever. Not that I'd want to be there right now, I have to say, with current sort of, you know, stuff going on in this country. But that sort of thing of changing your life doesn't necessarily mean that you lose those ghosts. So I think coming to settle with those ghosts and coming to settle with your grief and just more stuff. So for me, it's more my work on me has made me probably a little bit of a better person, but also recognizing as well that I've been through a lot, and not dismissing that, because I think you know, I've been very dismissive in the past, and then when various points when I've got the paperwork out, because it still sits here in the house. I really must get rid of it, but I've got all of the paperwork out. And I thought, God, that is a load of paperwork. But every single sheet of paper relates to something that happened to me. And it's a lot. And recognizing that. And also, actually, dare I say it, being ill for other reasons and having Tika look after me for other reasons and not just around related to fertility treatment, and when he's been ill, looking after him. So you're looking after each other for different reasons, because then you can actually, that sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? Not that I wish anyone ill, but actually you learn to care for each other in different ways, and that actually it isn't all about sex. And it's okay if sometimes you have sex and it's not really good. That's okay too. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't matter. It's not like that doesn't matter. And not being too scared of that. And also, just if it isn't right, it's not the right day, or there's an anniversary or something's happened that day, being open about that too, learning to have those conversations, because it's not going to break something. Breaking it's probably forcing yourself to do things when you don't want to do it. It's being a bit kind to yourself, as you said before, Sarah, being kind. Whatever reason we end up here in this space, it's because we've been through something. Whether that's life, well, it's all life, isn't it, actually? We've been through life, and we've probably been through an awful lot more than most people have, and actually coming to terms with that in some way is also really important too. That's all I've got to say. I'm sorry, that's not a very good answer, because I still feel like I'm so much work in progress. I really do. I can't say there's really any one thing that's made sort of us as a couple work, other than communication, I suppose. But it's actually just having a connection each day, but ultimately I think thinking of people who aren't in relationships, it's about forgiving yourself, being kind to yourself, recognizing that if you have been through IVF on your own, understanding you went through that on your own, and God, you're bloody brave, you're amazing. Whatever reason that you are here in this space right now with us is that you've been through something. You have individually, and for some of us it's with somebody else, and it's a lot. And just understanding that, because I think people can be so dismissive, as Jodie says about disenfranchised grief. People be very dismissive of that, incredibly dismissive, but don't dismiss that grief.
Yeah, I think I'll be quite interested to see what our thoughts are when we've sort of taken this chat in for ourselves and reflected on it, because we start. Like I said, I had washed my hair, smelt good, thinking, okay, we're going to talk about sex, and it's just
preparing for a date, weren't you? Really?
Yeah, I was. Vicky was laughing. I said, "No, I've got to trim my beard. Hang on." Yeah. Got the David Beckham deodorant on. Thank God it doesn't make me speak like him. But it's been such an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
And so I'll say intimacy just has tentacles that ripple into so many places in our lives because of who we are. Mm-hmm. It's been an extremely interesting conversation.
I've really enjoyed it. Yeah.
And look, by all means, if there's anyone out there that'd like to talk to either us, please get in contact with us. I'm more than happy to again tell my experiences if it helps someone.
Same
like you say too, it's a very personal journey that I don't mind talking about, of course.
Yeah. I think it's just talking. I think just starting that conversation. I think that I think we've started now. We'll finish in a minute, but we will.
What?
Do you know what? I'm sorry. I was watching Mastermind the other day. Have you seen New Mastermind?
No.
What's his? Oh God, I've forgotten his name. Clive from the BBC News. He's amazing. Anyway, but yeah, no, we've started this conversation now, and I think that actually you can cut that bit, Michael. We've started this conversation You won't. I know you won't, but please. But we can revisit this conversation. I think once we've had this this was the hardest part, that thing going on. But now we've had that conversation. I think it's something that I think we do need to revisit. There's so many topics. I mean, we're so booked with topics. There's so much we're talking about in the next 6 months. There's loads that we're talking about in the next 6 months, but we will come back to it. We keep saying we'll come back to lots of other topics as well. We will though, because this is universal, regardless of gender, sexuality. It's universal. It's the thing that I think we have in common that we need.
And I would actually now we've had this conversation, because I was quite open before about being very uncomfortable having this conversation. I would be open to have guests on it as well, so we can definitely make this conversation a lot more richer.
Yeah. No, I'll be up for that. I think it's so important. We acknowledged it when we said we don't talk about it, and then we realised we don't, do we?
No,
as a community.
And when we think there's been some quite lengths of silence in this chat. Because, like you said, Sarah, it's telling of how difficult it is, and it's something that the three of us are not used to talking about together.
No.
We've talked about a lot of stuff. So it's definitely important.
Things that have actually been very, very personal, but we skipped this entirely.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. It's been interesting, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, it certainly has. We will revisit this topic again, but next time with some guests. As you've heard, it's a deeply interesting discussion, and we need more diversity next time. So if you're interested, please let us know via our website, www.thefullstoppod.com. And we also have some other great news that we forgot to mention on the show, that Berenice has been shortlisted for the IPSE Freelancer Awards for 2021. Sarah and I have everything crossed. We know how much Berenice's work means to her and how hard she works. We wish you all the best, Berenice. Now, of course, we always love to hear from our audience about your opinions or suggestions on how to improve the podcast, or you may want to follow us on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter, and you can find all those links on how to contact us at our website, www.thefullstoppod.com. We would also appreciate it if you could rate us on the platform you are using to listen to the podcast. The more ratings we get means the algorithm will make us more visible, and we can reach more of our community that are feeling there is no one out there that understands. And as always, it's important for us to let you know you are not alone. There was me thinking I'd need to go for a cold shower afterwards, and, totally different way of thinking about it.
Oh, my God. No wonder you were nervous. Performance anxiety.
I don't have anything to say there. You've been overthinking this so much. It's hilarious. Bless you. Oh. I think that's lovely. Honestly, that's brilliant. I think it's a really good episode.
Yeah, it was fascinating. We went in so many different directions, didn't we?